The Cold War, 1945 through 1989, though that second date, 1989, could be moved to 1990, 1991, 92, and depends on your point of view. What we're looking at is the Jarrett Chapter 13 Star Review. Okay, as you can see here at the bottom, we are looking at Star Review number 10. It's numbered a little bit different than our chapters, but this is the review for the Jarrett chapter number 13, which we are beginning. All right, let us move on to our next slide. The Cold War. And as you can see up here, we have a flag of the United States of America in the upper right-hand, there we go, sorry, upper left-hand corner. Having some issues with my pages. This is an automated slide presentation, so you'll have different things coming on and off and on, and you'll see it as we go. But anyway, up here in the upper left-hand corner is the American flag, and the upper right-hand corner, of course, is the Soviet flag. And down here at the bottom, we have Spy versus Spy. I'm sure you've seen that cartoon. If not, it was a pretty popular cartoon many, many years ago. The two spies, one good, one bad, one in white, one in black. Okay, anyway, let's move forward. Although the United States of America and the Soviet Union were allies during World War II, okay, we were allies. We did fight on the same side against the Germans, against the Axis powers. These two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the USA, were soon rather bitter rivals, very bitter rivals during the Cold War. And it was called the Cold War because they never confronted each other directly. And this is the key word right here, directly. Never confronted each other directly in open warfare. Why? Well, because of nuclear weapons. Each side had literally thousands of nuclear weapons, whether they were nuclear weapons that were on a ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, whether they were nuclear weapons that could be dropped from an airplane, they could be launched from a submarine. I mean, on and on and on. There were thousands of them, tens of thousands of them pointed at each other. And so because we had all these nuclear weapons pointed at each other, we never directly confronted each other in open warfare. However, there was an exchange in a war of words. There was an exchange of threats, spying, and one-upmanship, I'll explain that in a second, which led to frequent conflicts in pretty much every continent. So we and the Soviet Union had a war of philosophy, philosophical differences between a Republican form of government, which we have, or a direct democracy, I'm sorry, not a direct democracy, but a representative democracy, forgive me, representative democracy, and communism/socialism. There was a war of philosophy. There was a war of words, threats exchanged against each other. I'm going to do this if you do that, blah, blah, blah. Spying, oh God, yeah, we spied on each other a lot. There's any number of great Hollywood movies, great books that go into spying. James Bond. I'm sure you've all seen the James Bond movies. The original James Bond movies were based on the Cold War. Now, of course, Bond is British, not American, but you get the idea. And this concept of one-upmanship, always trying to outdo the other. I'm sure you have friends or family where when they bring home an A, you have to bring home an A+, or they score 3 goals in a soccer match, you have to score 4. If they score 2 touchdowns, you have to score 3. Again, you get the idea, trying to always outdo the other. All right, let's move forward. The roots of the Cold War. The roots of the Cold War, and again, as this thing loads up, let me make sure it gets fully loaded up there. There we go. The roots of the Cold War And here you have something I always thought was kind of cool. You have over here, and the upper left, the American people versus the Soviets. And again, as you can see, the Soviets are somewhat handcuffed. Now, this could mean any number of things, that the Soviet people were handcuffed by their government, that they were shackled together because the Soviet government didn't trust them, that they essentially were prisoners to their own political philosophy. And down here is a very disturbing image. We each saw ourselves as the supermen, as the heroes, if you will. All right, let's move forward. The roots of the Cold War lay in the competing ideological systems between the United States and the Soviet Union. Okay, there were two vastly different ideological ideals, but that were competing between the two nations. And so the United States wanted to spread its system of democracy. Actually, that should be a Republican form of government, or you could use the term representative democracy, since we are not a true democracy. And in the course of our system refers to the people ruling and the free enterprise system, capitalism. The Soviet Union, the USSR, or Russia, again, Russia is one nation within the Confederation, that is the USSR, the Soviet Union, but Russia is the dominant country. Moscow, the capital of Russia, dominates Russia. Russia dominates the USSR. Anyway, the Soviet Union wanted to see nations adopt communism, which is, of course, the government ruling. And we'll talk more about the differences between them two as we go forward. And, of course, these two differences is what led to the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, to clash. All right, let's move forward. Let's take a quick look at the differences between the two. And again, I told you we'd discuss the differences between them, and let's do this. And over here, we have the different categories right here. Okay, you got the different categories right there. And then we have across the top, the second category, we have the American democracy. I'm not going to write on them so they're easily seen. And then, of course, the one on the far right would be Soviet communism. So let's take a quick look at them, walk through each one a little bit, and then we'll move forward. So an American democracy, political system, in fact, let me get rid of this, so that way there's, so pretty. So in our political system, America, and I'm just going to use America, Soviet Union. I may use Russia from time to time. So I say Russia, I'm referring to the Soviet Union. I say the Soviet Union, I'm referring to the USSR. Okay. In America, we are a multi-party democracy. We are a democratic nation in which the people rule. Now, again, when I say democracy, we all understand that is the wrong term. We are not a democracy. We are not a direct democracy. You can use the term representative democracy, but we all use the term, though we all know it's wrong, we all use the word democracy because, again, it's something we all understand, and we should all understand what we're talking about. Okay, so we are a multi-party democracy. We have two main parties, the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, but we have any number of other parties that participate within the system at the local, regional, and national level. In the Soviet Union, they had one political party, and that was the Communist Party. And the Communist Party determined who ran for office. Right this moment, as I'm recording this, we are in the midst of a presidential race here in the United States. We, the people, are determining who will be the nominees for each party, whether it be the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. The other parties, the Green Party, the Labor Party, there's any number of different parties, different political parties, they will determine their own way how they choose their candidates. But we're going through the primary system right now. In communism, the government chooses. Okay? Economic system. We have free enterprise. Okay? Free enterprise, capitalism. Private ownership of property, supply and demand determine prices, limited government, involvement. So we are a free enterprise capitalistic country. We believe in private ownership of property. We use the concepts of supply and demand to determine prices, and we've gone over that numerous times. There's no need to do it again. We also believe in extremely limited government involvement, though again, over the years we've seen government involvement grow, but we do believe in limited government involvement. Again, I give you the analogy of the boxers and the referee. The boxers being the two individuals, the producers and the consumers, or even the employers and employees, and the referee being the government. Under communism, industries and farms are owned by the government. Essentially, everything is owned by the government. There is limited private property ownership. Education and health care provided by the government. Now, again, you can say the same thing about America, but in America, the national government sets certain standards, and then it's up to the local entities like Edinburgh CISD to implement them. In the Soviet Union, not only does the government set these standards, but they are strictly enforced. Let's move on. Religion. There is freedom of religion as guaranteed by the Constitution. In the Soviet Union, religion is discouraged, though it is not as actively attacked as it is in some communist countries, like China, for example, other countries like that. It is not overly encouraged in Russia, in the Soviet Union. Now, again, they don't go out and burn churches and round up church members and execute them on the spot. That has happened in China, but it's not something they encourage. So, religion is encouraged here in the United States. Hold on.
Mr. Salinas.
Alrighty, I am back. Okay, let's move on. I want to get a couple more slides done before I finish this. I'm a little over 12 minutes. We're going to get this done in about 20 minutes. Move forward. Individual rights. The Bill of Rights protects individual freedoms, and we have had numerous discussions on the Bill of Rights. We've had numerous discussions on some of the Supreme Court cases, which has refined or defined those rights as the courts see them. And so we will continue doing that as well. But again, we have a certain set of rights that are explicitly stated, both of them, in our Constitution. In the Soviet Union, no Bill of Rights. There is a secret police force that arrests dissidents, people who disagree with the government. There is government censorship. Now, is there censorship here in the United States? Well, yeah, a little bit. There are certain things that you can or cannot do. Is placing a PG or an R or an X rating on a movie censorship? Well, you could argue that. You could also argue that it is a way to aid parents or people who want to go see these movies, give them a warning of what they may see. So censorship would be, no, you cannot have this movie because it is this or that. So yeah, there are some rating systems. There is some censorship here on this campus. You, as a student, cannot go out and print. If we had a school newspaper that came out weekly or monthly, you cannot go out and print that, Dr. Garza is this, or the cafeteria tastes like it just goes out and digs up worms and feeds that to us, or whatever the case may be, because the school's not going to allow that. But if you are a newspaper reporter, if you're a magazine reporter, if you are an internet reporter, and you want to do an expose on school lunches, you can do that. But again, that's a different story, okay? So there is some censorship at some levels here, but not to the level that we see in the Soviet Union. And that's the whole idea. That's the differences between the two. And then lastly, under communism, individual rights, no free exercise of beliefs. If I want to go out and campaign for Hillary Clinton for president or for Donald Trump, if I want to go out and sell everything I have to follow the rock band, whatever rock band's out there. Oh my gosh, I can't even think of a rock band. Oh, Justin Bieber. Yes, I'm going to sell everything I own and follow the Biebs on tour. because I believe that he's a god. Okay, I can do that here in America, but they wouldn't allow me to do that, which I think it's a good thing. But they wouldn't allow me to do that in the Soviet Union. Finally, organizations, unions, and other organizations openly negotiate with employers. If you are a member of a union, bricklayers or electricians or plumbers, you can collectively bargain, and we've discussed this plenty in the past. I'm not going to go into it right now. You can openly negotiate. In the Soviet Union, all labor groups are run by the Communist Party. Everything you own, everything you have, everything you might have one day is given to you, is controlled by the Communist Party. And so there are the differences between the two. Let's move forward. Try to get in a couple of more slides. There's Joseph Stalin in the upper left-hand corner. I like the second one there. How to make everyone happy? Kill all those being unhappy. So how does Stalin make everyone happy? Well, it kills everybody who is unhappy. And then we go, you're being funny. Give the man a gulag. A gulag is sort of like a concentration camp. We talked about the concentration camps under Nazi Germany. By the way, there's sort of a picture of a gulag, a concentration camp, or as the definition they use down here in the bottom of it. A gulag is a forced labor camp. Siberia, by the way, is in the northern part of Russia. Extremely cold, nasty weather. Anyway, so I thought that was kind of a funny little gift right there. So anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. Yay. So let's move forward. Joseph Stalin was the leader of the Soviet Union. He was supposed to, he said he would create a classless society. And what that means is that there would be no classes, no upper class, no middle class, no rich, no poor. Okay, there is a classless society where everybody is essentially equal. A classless society that helped all workers. Instead, he established a brutal dictatorship with him, who be him be, that's a fair to midland arrow. That's getting better at this. Anyway, Joseph Stalin, having absolute control. Keep in mind, as I said, the Soviet Union is a confederation of nations. There's over 20 of them. In addition to that, after World War II, they controlled upwards of another dozen countries that they took from the Germans as the Germans were retreating from the Soviet Union back to Germany. When the Germans were forced out of Poland by the Soviets kept Poland. When the Germans were forced out of Czechoslovakia by the Soviets maintained a standing army in Czechoslovakia. So we're looking at 30, 40 or more countries controlled by Russia. Keep in mind, Russia dominates the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union dominates these countries that were captured from fleeing German forces. So the Soviet Union is dominated by Russia. Russia is dominated by Moscow. Moscow is dominated by the Politburo, which is their Congress. And guess who controls the Politburo? Yeah, you got it. Joseph Stalin. Or, as Franklin Roosevelt referred to him, Uncle Joe. Yeah, I never got that either. It's kind of dumb. Let's move forward. Anyone that Joseph Stalin considered to be a threat against him, with or without evidence. I mean, come on. We don't need any evidence. We're Joseph Stalin. With or without evidence. In fact, evidence just kind of slows us down most of the time. Anyone Stalin considered to be a threat could be executed on the spot. Could be executed, imprisoned, or sent to a gulag. This is absolute and total power, godlike power. that Joseph Stalin had. Look at one more slide and we will stop. The Yalta and Potsdam conferences. Okay, two separate conferences. Okay, we kind of got ahead of ourselves there a little bit. So here we have in 1945, as the year is moving toward summer, just before the end of World War II, we have the Yalta Conference. This is in 1945. The big three, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin. Okay. Here is Churchill. Here is Roosevelt. There's Stalin. Okay. So here we have the big three meeting in Yalta. They agreed upon the formation of the United Nations. Again, this is a continuation of Woodrow Wilson's dream of a League of Nations. They agreed upon a plan on how Germany would be divided up at the end of the war into essentially what would become East and West Germany. The nations they had liberated, keep in mind who's doing the liberating in some of these cases. Well, the person doing the liberating in some of these cases would be this little puppy right there. Hold on. Good morning, chiefs and staff. Please excuse. Sorry, back. And we have discussed how this puppy right here, Stalin, is one of the most brutal dictators the world has ever seen. And so, yeah, the word liberated and Stalin and the Soviet Union should never be used in the same sentence. But anyway, you get the idea. There was an agreement that nations liberated from Nazi or all-access control. So we're not just talking about the Germans necessarily. We're also talking about the Italians and the Japanese, but primarily the Germans, that these liberated nations would have free elections. Stalin even agreed to let Poland have free elections. And yeah, right, okay. The most brutal dictator the world's ever seen. The man who was arguably responsible for 25 to 30 million of his own people being killed. This does not include the people whose countries he controlled. We're talking about 25 to 30 million Russians he had killed. So I don't think he's going to let anybody do anything coming close to free elections. Okay, let's move forward. And here's a little bit of a New York Times headline: Big Three doom Nazism. In Reich referring to the Third Reich, the Third Empire, militarism. Agree on freed lands and I don't know what Oaks voting. I suppose that means something back then, but not to me, sorry. Unless we're talking about trees voting. Anyway, convoke United Nations, and I don't speak that language. I don't know what the heck convoke is. I'm sorry. You know what? So we're just going to kind of pass this one by and just sort of ignore most of that headline. Later, when they met at Potsdam, which is another conference after FDR is dead, later when the big three met at Potsdam, now the big three is Truman as opposed to Roosevelt, and you still have Churchill and Stalin. The big three disagreed. Okay, now I've gone over the time I wanted to spend on this particular slide presentation, so we're going to stop at this point. I'll let this thing load up again for another second or so there. And I think we're done. When we come back, there we go. When we come back, we will continue. But for right now, this PowerPoint is going to end. This has been part 1, okay, part 1 of this slide presentation. And we will continue it with this slide when we get to the second one. So, bye.